And you let me know also when I can begin talking. So it is 9 o'clock, even though my clock and my iPhone are different, show different times. And good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. And thank you for joining us today. A warm welcome from the Web Secretariat. I am Meral Güzel, the Women's Empowerment Principal Specialist of UN Women, and the webinar, Gender Responsive Procurement Today, is co-hosted by We Empower G7 program and UN Women's Flagship program on stimulating equal opportunities for women entrepreneurs. And We Empower G7 program is funded by European Union and implemented by UN Women and the International Labour Organization. And the Flagship program on stimulating equal opportunities for women's entrepreneurs is generally supported by NAMA Women's Advancement Establishment. Before I go over the agenda, and it is just to mention quickly on the house rules, even though now we are using the Zoom platform for such a long time, for months, and we all became the Zoom gurus. So I guess so not much explanation, but please first, all the participants, please, and speakers, please mute yourself. And secondly, if you have a question during the webinar, please enter it in the chat box, and we will be happy to interact with you. My colleagues, Anna and Osa, they will be moderating the chat box. And at the end, time permitting, we will try to answer to your questions. I would like to go over the agenda quickly. The opening remarks will be given by our dear colleague, Jana Schoenfeld of European Union Delegation of the United States. And after I give a brief overview on the WEPs, and we have here panelists, representatives of 3 organizations, Mary Kay, WEConnect International, and Open Contracting Partnership. Our panelists will speak about practical policies and practices and services that companies could develop, implement, and also practice to help in the procurement responses to COVID. So we are and the closing remarks will be given by our colleague from South Africa multi-country offices, Agnes Piri. Now I would like to invite Jana Schoenfeld, and the program manager for foreign policy instrument of the European Commission at the EU delegation to the United States. Jana joined the EU delegation to the US in 2019 last year. And she has been working for over 15 years on European Union affairs, mostly on EU external relations. And her work experience within the EU institutions includes the European Parliament, European Commission Services for Enlargement and for Development and Cooperation, as well as EU agency, executive agency for small and medium-sized enterprises that Thomas thanks today. So over to you, Jana.
Thank you so much, Meryl. Thank you to all the colleagues from We Empower in the Web program. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the globe. As Meryl said, my name is Jana Schoenfeld. I work at the EU delegation to the United States of America on this great We Empower project, which is organizing the seminar today. Thank you so much for taking the time to come today to join us and to discuss new strategies to help advance and sustain women entrepreneurship. The EU, along with UN and ILO, supports the We Empower program and the mission to promote gender equality and women's economic empowerment. We all know that already prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, women-owned businesses lack the proper support they need to fairly compete in the global economy and in the markets. Many countries do not have the tools which, specifically support women entrepreneurs, women-owned businesses, and this has even heightened during the pandemic. So the crisis presents, in my eyes, a great opportunity to rethink the way we support women-owned businesses and refocus on that objective. So gender-responsive procurement is one of the modern tools to achieve our aims. Private and public procurement directly fuels the global economy. They have a big impact on how businesses are done and who is selected to conduct services. And yet women-owned businesses receive very few procurement contracts, which prohibits them to participate in international value chains. changing the standard procurement and purchasing practices of companies, public and private alike, is vital in curbing systemic discrimination. It offers great opportunities also for the companies and to support gender-responsive businesses. So I think gender-responsive procurement is a relatively new topic for many countries and many companies. And that's why we have the webinar today. And that's also why the European Institute for Gender Equality is currently starting a new project on supporting gender equality in the economy through public procurement, which should hopefully bring us a better view of best practices around and practical tools, just like we are discussing today. The EU has also recently adopted a comprehensive action plan on gender equality and women's empowerment, our third action plan 2021-2022, which incorporates all the lessons learned of the last years. So to cut a long story short, we're here today to encourage companies to update and upgrade their practices and their procurement procedures. We believe this is critical to reshape the future while holding companies accountable for a better and more inclusive economy. I hope this webinar will help you to incorporate new approaches into your own businesses. We are extremely grateful to the knowledgeable speakers, practitioners who are sharing their experience with us today. And we are now diving into those topics and get some practical advice. I'm looking forward to hearing from our great speakers. And yeah, let's all together build back the economy and build back better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jana, for your welcome. And again, thank you very much for being here. We will have to learn more actually on the EU Institute JRP program. I'm happy to see we are having the parallel efforts on that. And I will begin talking about the WEPs because this webinar is part of a series of the WEPs webinar to help companies to implement the WEPs. And WEPs is the overarching framework, is the primary vehicle for corporate delivery on gender equality dimensions of the 2030 agenda. It was established in 2010 as a joint initiative of UN Global Compact and UN Women. And as you know, there are 7 principles that guide businesses on how to advance gender equality and women's empowerment. Just to help you visualize the principles, we can cluster them as follows. So the first one is about this one, high-level corporate leadership, is about top-level leadership, like CEO, the board, and hopefully a dedicated unit, maybe an allocated budget. And the second, third, and fourth one, they cover all workplace HR issues that are largely discussed lately and those last years, and they are addressed, like diversity and inclusion, equal pay, flex work, and sexual harassment, actually all kinds of gender-based harassment, and safety at work, but also during the commutes, and training and career advancement for women. The fifth one, WEPs 5, focus on support of women-owned businesses that we will be talking today. And it also includes and covers gender-responsive procurement and marketing practices. The sixth one, they cover all advocacy and CSR work. And the last one, measurement and procurement, is about accountability and reporting. So because the support of women's entrepreneurship, it's the first time I'm doing this, so I hope I will be able to do that. Yeah, the support of women's entrepreneurship and gender responsive procurement is covered under WEPs 5. Let's have a look on a short video. It's kind of a launch. It is not public yet. I hope you will like it.
Enterprise development, supply chain, and marketing practices. Let us review the key features of the principle. Expand business relationships with women-owned enterprises, including small businesses and women entrepreneurs. Support gender-sensitive solutions to credit and lending barriers.
I don't have enough savings that I can use as collateral. And if I can't get a credit from the bank, I will not be able to launch my business.
No problem. We offer collateral-free loans for startups and accept jewels and gold as an alternative collateral for women entrepreneurs.
Ask business partners and peers to respect the company's commitment to advancing equality and inclusion.
Our company is advancing towards gender equality and inclusion.
Respect the dignity of women in all marketing and other company materials. Ensure that company products, services, and facilities are not used for human trafficking and/or labor or sexual exploitation. Let us consider an example to see the principle in action. A Swedish manufacturer facilitates women producers of raw materials in developing countries to trade directly with the manufacturer, thus improving their income by reducing the number of intermediaries in the supply chain.
That was a very fun project to work. So the principle 5 focuses on implementing supply chain and marketing practices that empower women. And of course, there are many sub-WEPs, many actions under 5, but it basically encourages companies to buy from women-owned companies and those that are committed to WEPs. But also to establish and prioritize and implement and gender responsive and ethical procurement policies and practices. We developed a guidance note on gender responsive procurement and just launched it actually, that is available on weps.org/resources. So the guidance note gives very concrete strategies for companies on how to systematically source their goods and services from other companies and other companies that align with the WEPs. And with the guidance note is also aimed to all business leaders, to all signatories, to all companies who have signed the WEPs. But of course, it is particularly relevant and for supply chain and purchasing department. The WEP Secretariat worked on a full cycle of WEPs journey for all signatories throughout their different level of engagement. And at each stage, we provide companies resources, tools, and capacity building to support them. I will not go over them. It is just to let you know it begins with the considering stage before signing. And so the signing, how they can activate their signatory and how they can engage their networks. And finally, how they can report. And for our participants, just to give you a snapshot, how it works for all our participants here to the webinar today who are not signatory. So first, the CEO should sign the CEO statement of support, which is possibly in any company is the most challenging part. It takes more time to do that between the office of the company, the CEO, and the communication department and the legal department, and so many questions back and forth. So this is the consider stage. And after they sign, it comes to the completing the online platform, which is the easiest part. It basically takes maybe less than half an hour. If the CEO statement of support is signed and if the support came directly from the top. And after the completion of their online form and after they acceptance, and they are listed at the global listing, they will receive, all signatories receive a welcome package. And the welcome package includes all key messages on gender equality, women's empowerment, and internal communication, press release templates, promotional material that they can use. And finally, completing their company profile page, and which is it's a very important moment for them because this is where they can show, they can be more visible, but they can also showcase and their good practices there and their results there. So here, just some few pictures on how it looks like signing the WEPs and in different companies and in different ways. And now COVID is different, but generally we are very much engaged. Global Compact offices and UN Women local offices, we are very much engaged with the companies when they sign. The top one is the first signatory from Kazakhstan, and the second one with Michel Bachelet, one of the first signatories globally from Turkey. The third one, they only invited women entrepreneurs from Kenya with a huge big cake with our logo on it. And in Kuwait, it was a public event with the participation of the Minister of Family. And the last one is very heartwarming, I think. Those are the first CEOs, the first signatories from Pakistan. And they read the CEO statement as a pledge in front of all the private sector audience. So it was great to see that. And so now at the activate stage, company profiles can be created after the signatory receives the confirmation. And a guidance note, as you can see here, is sent to the companies, to the signatory, to assist them for the creation of the page. So this page, I mean, here we can see one of our speakers, Deborah and Mary Kay. And the company profile page is a great way to communicate, in one sense, your commitment, you know, but also gives a high visibility. And then we encourage the companies to create their code cards, and we are very happy also to collaborate on that. And again, those cards are efficient ways of communicating the company's commitment, support the webs, but also it making a call, you know, while disseminating this, companies are making a call to all other private sector companies and to sign the webs. The signatories will find different categories of resources that they can learn on how to engage and implement. And through the case studies, they can learn how to go in deep in one specific area and learn the very sincere implementation with the lessons learned. And again, there are so many different ways of engaging the networks. And so for the reporting platform, it is just stay tuned. It will be coming in few weeks, and it's one of the most important parts. So from here, and we are beginning our panel discussion, and we have today 3 organizations that will bring different perspectives on strategies and examples that they can recommend on undertaking the increase of gender responsive procurement. And we should also, and I'm sure the speakers also will mention that the pandemic has been really crushing for women and women-owned businesses. And so governments, they have responded, yes, on some way, and in some cases the response was massive, but it was largely ignored the needs of women, the specific women. So today, only 1 in 8 countries they have measures in place to protect women against the socio-economic impacts of the virus. So this crisis can be also an opportunity to advance reform, like long-pending reform and action. So we in UN Women, we are advocating for gender-responsive procurement as a strategic lever to support women's own businesses. And so our first speaker is Elizabeth Vasquez, and she's the co-founder, president, and CEO of WEConnect International, and she's a serial entrepreneur. I'm sure if not all of our participants are very knowledgeable about WEConnect International and Elizabeth. And WEConnect International is a corporate-led nonprofit that helps women, that help to empower women-owned businesses. So welcome, Elizabeth. And first of all, could you please explain briefly about WEConnect to our participants? But then can you tell us, from WEConnect International's many years of work and the work with your members now during COVID, what are the current challenges faced by women entrepreneurs to obtain contracts? So we may have maybe some follow-up questions. Thank you. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And thank you so much for hosting this conversation. I just so deeply appreciate the work of UN Women and the importance of everyone signing up to the WEPs and all of the partners who helped to make this conversation possible and the other speakers. It shows that there is momentum for this concept of gender responsive procurement, that it actually matters how we spend our money and to understand with whom are we spending that money, and is any of that money being spent with the women of the world who represent half the population, who pay taxes, who work and who care for our communities. So the care economy is really being held up, especially in this moment in time, by the women of the world, of course, in partnership with the men we love. But it is a team effort. And I think it is time that we recognize the important role and that we put money behind it. And that, so much of it is based on volunteerism and good faith and goodwill and love and passion. But at some point, we really have to look at the economics that make this type of support possible and ensure that both men and women have an equal opportunity to contribute to and benefit from the growth of our economies and the changing needs of our communities. And WEConnect International is a unique nonprofit because we were created by the market. The corporations got together and said, we want to buy more products and services from women-owned businesses. So they created this peer network to find women-owned businesses around the world. We're serving women business owners based in 125 countries and growing every day. We are able to certify that they're women-owned businesses in almost 50 countries now. We do this through local partnerships, but we also leverage technology. And I think that's actually a really, really important lesson learned for us, is that yes, it's important to have a physical infrastructure where people can feel connected locally, but we do need to all do a better job of leveraging technology and getting comfortable with it as a way to stay connected with the rest of the world. And I think that's one of the lessons that we've taken away in the survey work that we've done this year with the women business owners in our network, where we very specifically ask them every quarter, what is the impact of COVID-19 on you and your business and your employees? And unfortunately, this is no surprise to anyone, 82% of them said they have been negatively impacted by COVID. I frankly don't know why it's not 100%, but the truth is there are some businesses that have found opportunity in this environment to thrive and to innovate and to continue to keep their doors open. But for the 82% that have been negatively impacted, it ranges from their personal ability to spend time on their business, given their other responsibilities with their families and communities, but also just the level of motivation of their employees, their ability to use technology, or if they have to work in person, the logistics of that and getting the input products and services they need from around the world has been a massive, massive challenge. Continuing to stay connected to their clients and to find new clients is a huge challenge. But I'm telling you, 62% of these women business owners that we surveyed in our network said that they are identifying ways to cut unnecessary expenses, so they're becoming more efficient. 43% said they've shifted to a digital business model. That is huge. 43% of the businesses in our network shifting to a digital business model in less than a year is really amazing. And it shows the level of commitment these women business owners have to serving their communities, their clients, keeping people employed, which is a #1 priority for so many of these women business owners. But they're also, 42% of them are creating a new business line, looking around at what the needs are. They're reinventing their businesses and offering what it is the world says it needs. So there is some reason for optimism in terms of the resiliency of these women-owned businesses and what we can learn from them in a time of crisis. And one of the key deliverables that we as an organization have had in trying to understand these massive challenges and these massive seismic shifts in the economy is how can we leverage technology by working with partners. So recently with USAID, SAP Ariba, IBM, Accenture, ExxonMobil, Procter & Gamble, we came together and we've launched a new platform called WeCommunity to make it as easy as possible for women around the world to register in this network for free. And so in doing that, it's easier in 10 languages for the buyers of the world to find these women suppliers, which is one of the #1 challenges to women being able to keep their doors open, is being able to have buyers find buyers and have buyers find them. So that's just a quick hit. I know we have a lot of other great topics to get to, but that's some of what we're learning on this journey. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I mean, still, it's great to hear that some 10-something%, they found their way to innovate and, to move on. And your great initiative, we will come back to that. So our second speaker is Deborah, and she's the Chief Operating Manager of Mary Kay and responsible of the company's global supply chain and research and development organizations. So furthermore, she oversees the finance, public affairs, and strategic planning divisions at Mary Kay Inc. And she is also the founder of the Women's Entrepreneur Accelerator that we will explore today. And it's great to have you today, Debbie, and over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're so thrilled to be a part of this platform today. It's exciting to talk about, even in these desperate times that many people are facing. There's lights, as Elizabeth shared, of opportunity and innovation that are coming out of this. So excited to be talking about Mary Kay and its sponsorship of the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator. So for those of you who don't know about Mary Kay, we're a global beauty company in the direct selling space, founded in 1963 by our founder, Mary Kay Ash. And she founded the company because she was tired of being passed over by men. She would train them, and then they would get promoted into jobs that she could do, but she never had the opportunity to. So she retired and then founded this company because she believed that women had the opportunity, needed the opportunities that weren't being provided to them. And as she worked and expanded this company, we're in more than 35 markets around the world. She continued to work well into the 1990s. And she once said that, watching women achieve their dreams is what kept her inspired and engaged. And so about 2 years ago, in 2018, we decided to take that dream even further. And we started work on planning first to be a part of WEPs. So we became a WEP signatory. And then we launched the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator in 2019 at the UN General Assembly. And it's a multi-agency bringing together 6 UN agencies, those being UN Women, UN Office of Partnerships, ITC, ILO, the UN Global Compact, and the UNDP, bring them all together with the goal of supporting women entrepreneurs around the globe in every country with no barriers of access to training, to funding, to advocacy, benefits of advocacy. So we've been thrilled to be a part of that. It just launched. And we think it's going to have a huge impact in supporting what Elizabeth just described in terms of the needs and what can be achieved if we enable women entrepreneurs. There was a study by McKinsey that said if we could increase women's access, the number of women entrepreneurs around the globe, that could be a $13 trillion opportunity in global GDP, which is really needed now more than ever. As Elizabeth said, women have borne the brunt of the financial impact of the pandemic for many different reasons. And so an emphasis and push toward more equality when it comes to procurement is more critical than ever right now, more needed more than ever coming out of the pandemic. So the accelerator is unique in terms of its magnitude. We're, again, partnering with 6 UN agencies. Our goal is to reach 10 million, engage and educate and empower 10 million women entrepreneurs over the next 10 years. We're trying to provide access. So again, access through digital platforms, training, resources. So no barriers to entry, does not cost you to be a part of the program. So we're excited about that in terms of its scope and reach, and then its focus. So we know that by focusing on education, funding, advocacy, and then participation, we think we can achieve this 10 million women goal. So.
Thank you. I think building not only a business, but a whole network to empower other women after retirement, it is very inspiring for all of us. Thank you very much. I think we will learn more on the accelerator, right? On the second round.
Yes. We'll talk about
thank you so much, Deborah. So we have Lindsay Marchessault as our first speaker, and she's the Director of Data and Engagement of Open Contracting Partnership, also located in Washington, D.C., as Elizabeth. And Open Contracting is an independent, not-for-profit working in over 30 countries, advocating for better, more responsive, and more open public contracting, In 2020, the organization undertook research, I think Lindsay will talk about that, which identified key challenges faced by both governments and women-led businesses, as well as innovative practices in the open contracting community. So thank you, Lindsay, for joining today. So your organization looks to transform government contracting worldwide. Could you please tell us about the roles the public sector has to play in transforming procurement to support women's entrepreneurship and economic empowerment, and what are the specific examples of this being done? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Meral. And let me say thank you to everybody, all my fellow panelists. It's an honor to be here. And I fully agree with the points that Elizabeth and Deborah have made before me, and I'll try not to repeat what they have already said. So as Meral mentioned, I work for the Open Contracting Partnership, and most of the focus of our work is helping to make public contracting more open, more accountable, and ultimately more fair, effective, and also inclusive. And the lessons that I'm going to talk about today, while they were generated from the public sector, I think actually are also applicable in the private sector as well. So hopefully the lessons learned through this research will be applicable to both the public sector and private sector folks that are on the call today. So 13 trillion is a number we've heard already today, but it's also the estimated value of national public procurement around the world every year. And that's just the national level, not including cities and states, but at the national level. So this is an absolutely staggering amount of money, and that's not including private sector procurement. If we added private sector procurement on top of that, it would be almost an inconceivable amount of money. So the economic opportunity associated with public procurement really cannot be overstated. And as the people already on this call have mentioned, women's participation in procurement, whether private sector or public sector, is very much underrepresented around the world. So we set to investigate why, and could we switch to the next slide? Thank you. So we set out to work with an organization called Value for Women to investigate what are the barriers that women-led businesses are facing when trying to enter these marketplaces, and what are some emerging practices that are starting to work in their favor. So some of the barriers that women encounter on a daily basis would be the ones you might expect, like negative perceptions, bias and discrimination, but there's also some more structural and systemic barriers that exist as well. So for example, one of the things right away that many, I think both in the public sector and private sector is an obstacle is being able to identify women-led businesses. So one of the things that we work with our partners a lot on is getting better data about their public procurement and who are their potential bidders and who are their suppliers and what are their characteristics, because a lot of the times governments do have policies related to inclusion, but there's a great saying, if you don't measure it, you won't achieve it. So that's why it's so important to start to publish that gender disaggregated data. And I'm sure that that message will resonate with Elizabeth, since her work involves kind of connecting the supply and demand. And so that's kind of one of the first steps. And then the other part of it that might be a bit more surprising was a lot of the things that came up was women's lack of access to finance, because in the banking sector, there is still a lot of discrimination, particularly in a lot of the countries that we did the research in. And so women-led businesses who went to the bank were asked, you know, where's your husband? Where's your male business partner? And they weren't able to get access to finance. Now, why is that a problem for public procurement? That's not a discriminatory practice of public procurement. That's a discriminatory practice of banks. But when governments have a hard time paying suppliers on time, and suppliers have to wait a really long time to get paid, it's really important to have that access to finance. Otherwise, a smart women business person is not going to bid on a contract if they're not going to get paid. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. And in addition, there's kind of negative perceptions on both sides as well. A lot of the time, you know, the procurement processes are not particularly transparent, and you know, there's a lot of stories in the news about you know, corruption and other challenges in public procurement. So a lot of businesses who have not participated in the marketplace might be hesitant to do so because they also have negative perceptions that need to be addressed. And they need to be assured through transparency, through engagement, through additional oversight, that if they put in all that time and effort to prepare a bid, that the bid will be treated fairly and that they will actually have a fair shot and it will be worth their time and effort to put that time in. Can we move to the next slide, please? So you asked me to talk about an example of where things are starting to go well, because, unfortunately, this is a major challenge in most places. I don't think there's any country in the world where there is equal access to procurement opportunities. But Dominican Republic is one country that has employed a gender responsive procurement policy to improve the inclusion of women-led businesses. And I'm going to share some statistics now, and these statistics are possible because of gender desegregated data and because they actually took the time to start to measure it and start to have an intentional strategy about how to achieve it. So over the past few years, the country's new procurement strategy led to a 16% increase in the contracts awarded to smaller businesses led by women, where it started at 10% a couple of years ago. So that represents a spending of about $41 million US per year, and 26% in 2019 with a value of $125 million. So although competitive public tenders are still a male-dominated field in the country, the percentage of the contracts awarded to women, of these larger contracts awarded to women, also increased to almost 30% in 2019. But the team's most important achievement, in my opinion, was to develop a big picture understanding of the problem. And they did this with the help of data, which was the raw material to drive the changes, but also by actively listening to the needs of the women-led businesses and also the procuring entities across the country, because it involves a lot of conversation to understand what are the concerns that procurement entities might have about working with businesses they've never worked with before, who maybe they're questioning the experience level, and what are the concerns of women-led businesses in thinking like, is this worth my time to participate? Will I be treated fairly? So bringing the two together is quite key to coming up with some solutions. And I think I'll stop there. I have some more slides when it comes back to me later on. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Lindsay. And it was great to hear from you. And helping women and collecting data, right? And listening to the women-owned and women-led enterprises and providing resources to their specific needs, I understand, are really the core work of what you are doing. So I am returning back again to Elizabeth and to ask, what specific action and practices have you seen this year specifically? You began talking about that, yes, but then that the companies have been taking in sourcing more from women-owned businesses. Over to you.
Thank you. And again, so appreciate the specific examples that Lindsay and Deborah gave of actions that are being taken in a way that leverages partnerships. I think that's really key to understand, is this is going to have to, if we're going to change the way the status of SDG 5 to reach equality in the next 10 years, we are going to have really strong public-private partnerships with civil society and the women themselves at the center, deciding what it is they want and need. And my experience in listening to the women business owners of the world, what they want most is just an equal opportunity to compete. Like, they don't need quotas or set-asides, or they're not looking for grants or charity. They just want to compete. Like, they know what the problems are because of the role women play in their families and communities and in business. They know exactly what the problems are. They just don't necessarily have the assets to be able to deliver those solutions. So we need to get as much money into women's hands as fast as possible. And that, in my opinion, is why gender inclusive procurement is so important, is because it helps to ensure that women are at the table and able to compete for the business that is out there, whether it's government contracts, corporate contracts, multilateral contracts. I mean, we're doing so much right now with the UN procurement, actually. actually, because they have their own purchasing power. Similarly, we're doing a lot with the World Bank Group and the IFC. They have their own purchasing power. We're doing a lot with the Asia Development Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. We all, as individuals and as organizations, spend money every day on the things that we care about, the things that we value. And if the ones that are championing women's economic empowerment, aren't spending our money on everyone who has the ability to deliver a solution to a problem we're facing, then we're all missing out. It is a huge missed opportunity. So we're talking about equal opportunity here. And I think that's important. It's an important thing to remember when we talk about actions that are being taken. So we're working with corporations, I don't know, over 130 now, with over $1 trillion in annual purchasing power. And companies are going beyond just their own purchasing power. They're also investing in finding these women business owners and developing their capacity to be competitive. So Procter & Gamble, we're doing events with them around the world, trainings. We're doing trainings with ExxonMobil. We're doing trainings with the Moody's Foundation on credit worthiness and why it's so important to have good credit so that you can sell, not only get a bank loan, that's obvious, right? But you're not going to be able to sell to a large buyer if you have bad credit and you don't have the ability to, leverage resources and move assets around, because guess what? Not everyone is paying on time right now. So we have to be honest about the new environment that we're all in and become really creative, really fast about how, in an asset-based lending environment, we ensure that everyone has the assets they need to be able to keep their doors open and employ the people who need and deserve jobs around the world. And so that's, I think, the level of urgency that we're all working under, and why you see so many collaborations right now that are unusual collaborations that will become the norm out of necessity. We just finished a report with 20 really important financial institutions, major banks, global banks, along with other financial institutions on this Council of Scaling Women-Owned Businesses. And the report is public, and it actually provides very specific, concrete steps that we can all take to link the work that we do on ensuring women have access to not only finance, which is obviously key, but access to markets, and how those things are interdependent, and understanding the environment in which those things sit is where I think the women's economic empowerment principles, or the women's empowerment principles, become so key if we want to achieve SDG 5. So, I mean, the good news is there are very specific, concrete actions that are being taken. This new platform is going to make it so much easier for buyers to find women suppliers. Frankly, buyers need us all to make it as easy as possible. They don't want a bunch of different databases, a bunch of different definitions, a bunch of different standards, a bunch of different peer networks. They need us to make it really easy to find women suppliers so that they can leverage their purchasing power. They have really good intentions. They do, in fact, want to spend more money with women-owned businesses, but we all have to make that really easy for them to be able to do that, and to make sure that the invisible is visible, and that it's poised and ready to compete and to win business. So I think for me, that's where sort of bottom line at the end of the day, are we actually moving money? Are we moving assets? And we're not taking it away from men. And this is a really important thing for all of us to fully embrace. We are trying to create more wealth, right? We're trying to increase the size of the pie that everyone is contributing to and benefiting from. So that's why I'm, in spite of all the challenges, and it is some days heartbreaking, many days actually, I'm optimistic still, because we have an opportunity to rebuild how we do business with each other and make it so much better. So I'd love to hear the comments from my colleagues on this panel, because I love this stuff, as you can tell.
Maral, could I just build on what Elizabeth said and give you very practical examples here at Mary Kay? Until 2 years ago, as we approached signing on to WEPs, we were not tracking specifically women-owned procurement, where we were buying. And it wasn't, we just didn't ever think about, when we set up our ERP, our enterprise resource planning systems, where we track our procurement, we didn't put in fields to indicate whether a business that we were buying from was a woman-owned business or not. So we just didn't have the data. So it took a while to, one, go out and figure out where we were spending. So as Elizabeth and Lindsay said, and I think the challenges in business are the same for public procurement, it's first gathering the data. So having that, taking a very intentional approach to where do we spend today, and looking that data. And, honestly, I was embarrassed that, it was only 6% of our spend is with specifically women-owned businesses. But having the data, having the visibility is the first step in the journey. So then we could set some targets on how much do we want to improve year over year. And, just two very specific examples. It's hard because sometimes in our supply chain, or where we spend a lot with large corporations that wouldn't necessarily meet the definition of women-owned business. But we launched a major initiative to support our digital, to implement a new digital platform. And while we're spending, the platform is a public company, Salesforce.com, we were able to leverage a women-owned business to handle the change management of adopting this new platform. And what was amazing is that, they were actually the most competitive bid. We included them in our bidding process, and they were actually, we didn't have to lean in and say, oh, here are all these companies and the women-owned businesses maybe not as competitive. They were actually more competitive and cheaper. So to Elizabeth's perspective, we benefited from that. And we made the pie bigger, because with that savings, we could do even more work from a change management perspective. At Mary Kay, we spend a lot on jewelry. We do a lot of recognition and rewards through jewelry, and incorporating a priority just in the sourcing. So as Elizabeth said, when we went out to bid out our jewelry contract, making sure that we included a woman-owned business in the bidding process was critical. Finding it, including her, and guess what? She won. She was cheaper again. So, those are just two very tangible examples. And then, what we're focused on with our buyers is not just, one, getting more women into the bidding process, because I believe firmly, as with those two examples, they can be just as competitive if we go source them and find them. But then also with our established partners in our supply chain, asking them to sign on to WEPs, asking them about their data, and asking them to have goals so that we can get the next level down. So there's, different levels within procurement, kind of a level 1, 2, and 3, and how you look in your supply chain. So it cascades if you can set the targets for your own suppliers to include their sourcing from women-owned businesses.
Thank you, Deborah, but I think you can just go on because I would turn to you anyways, and to talk about the accelerator, and because the gender responsive procurement is one of the key strategies for the accelerator, for women entrepreneurs. So
absolutely, yeah.
Maybe you can just, you just make the link very well from Elizabeth to, to Mary Kay, and please go on to the accelerator.
Certainly. So as we've said, we're working with 6 UN agencies, which I think is fairly unique in terms of bringing 6 agencies together. So the scope of it, but as I said, we want to educate and empower women entrepreneurs around the world. The goal of impacting or reaching 10 million women over the next 10 years. So our goal is really, we think we're, by providing pathways through education, access, educating governments, businesses on the importance of this, providing resources in terms of funding. One of our goals will be providing funding programs for women-owned businesses to help them conquer the challenges that Lindsay and Elizabeth highlighted. Is it's not enough just to have a business, you need access to capital. So helping with the funding, and then that focused on the importance of procurement is so critical. And within NGOs, corporate America or corporate corporations around the globe and governments to understand that importance. So bringing these all together is the focus of, and not focused in just one area. There are, for example, training programs for women who want to start businesses, and we want to support those and expand those, but it can't stop there, because women need access to capital. They need access to buyers to make them aware. They need the technology to enable all that. And so it's a multifaceted program with different initiatives across, working with the support of these 6 UN agencies to make this a reality over the next 10 years.
Thank you, Deborah. I mean, it's a very unique initiative. It is certainly very ambitious. It can be very transformative, and now so timely, given
Yes,
the impact
absolutely.
on women's entrepreneurs. And I think it makes sense now to ask to Lindsay. And so now we discussed the potential of procurement, the gender responsive procurement. And now we discussed about the impact of COVID on women entrepreneurs. And there are a huge number of government measures brought in support to negative economic impact of COVID. But aren't we kind of disappointed not to see more adjusting of public procurement rules, to the needs of women-owned businesses? So what do you think could be done?
Thank you, so much for the question. And also, I really enjoyed hearing from Elizabeth and Deborah. So first, I think we just need to talk about how unforeseen and in many ways disastrous the COVID-19 response has been around the world, particularly when it comes to public procurement. We're talking about huge supply and demand shocks, widespread, inefficient and in some cases mismanaged use of emergency procedures for procurement and emergency funds. And we have seen some pretty interesting and shocking examples around the world just about how basically the crisis has exposed long-standing weaknesses and exacerbated them that occur in our procurement systems, in our supply chains. If you switch to the next slide, one of the examples that usually gets a laugh, but it's also kind of a tragedy, was I think there was a €6 million contract in I believe it was a Balkans country to purchase ventilators, and they bought them from a raspberry farm. So we're talking about a lot of usage of multi-purpose firms who have no experience selling the thing that they're selling, and sometimes firms that were created within 6 months of selling. So, and that have connections, political connections as well. If we go to the next slide. We actually wanted to really support our partners around the world to better understand what was happening with the COVID-19 public procurement. So we sponsored 12 research teams in 12 different countries to look into this issue in more detail. They looked at more than 1.3 million public contracts and found that these patterns really held true kind of across the world, where there was higher prices, great disparity in unit prices paid for different buyers, high usage of these multi-purpose firms, use of firms less than 6 months old, and then serious quality and completeness issues in the published data and publicly available information about where this money was going. It's worth pointing out that the places where there were, let's say, better open contracting processes, where they had better systems already in place, where they were regularly coordinating, regularly engaging with the market, regularly publishing information about their public procurement, data was standardized, more timely, of better quality. It was much easier for the researchers to both monitor these issues, and also they were able to better understand why these things were happening, and were able to give better policy recommendations to policymakers on exactly where the inefficiencies were happening and what should be improved. Turning to inclusion and women-led businesses participation, I think it's been alluded to several times already, but women already were very underrepresented in public procurement, and unfortunately, in the crisis, women's participation has declined further, and both in terms of women-led businesses participation in procurement, as well as women's participation in the economy in general. So this is really tough times for for us ladies out there in the world. So we really, now actually is the time to put these policies in place, because if we're serious about building back better, we need to be serious about building back more inclusively, which means really trying to understand what are the issues that women entrepreneurs and women-led businesses are facing, to really try to put those gender responsive procurement strategies in place, to really work towards getting that data better, more open, more transparent about public procurement processes, and also really looking at the public procurement processes and see where things can be simplified to make them more fair and straightforward overall for all businesses to be able to fairly compete. Because, you know, oftentimes when we see public procurement opportunities, there's a lot of copy and pasted language about the qualifications that are needed, the experience that are needed, the technical requirements. And these might not actually be needed in order to fulfill the objective of what the procurement is trying to fulfill. So I think there's also a lesson to be learned here about procurement just becoming you know, more flexible overall, to be more fair to all kinds of different players in the market, not just women-led businesses. Can we switch to the next slide, please? And of course, you know, some of the things we talked about already is practical lessons about ensuring prompt payment, supporting to get access to finance. So for example, maybe it's too difficult to get prompt payment organized because you've got issues with your treasury and you've got a 40-year-old legacy system for managing invoices, but then you can work on access to finance initiatives for women-led businesses. And there's actually an interesting initiative happening in Paraguay where the procurement agency is working with the banks to try to come up with opportunities for banks to know when women are bidding on businesses, on opportunities, when they're being selected as suppliers, and how they can be able to grant credit because of that assurance that the procurement agency is able to give. So those are some interesting practices that are happening. And it's also about changing cultures and mindsets as well, about the idea of that being more inclusive is actually going to help us to achieve our goals. And it's not just a nice thing to do, that there's an actual business case for it. And I think both Deborah and Elizabeth mentioned really great examples about how women-led businesses are just as competitive, just as able to deliver value, sometimes even more, if they're given the opportunity to fairly compete in the marketplace. I'll go to the next slide to talk about a place where some of these things are coming together, a practical example. So this is also an example where UN Women has been involved in this example. And then we as Open Contracting Partnership have been working with the government of Colombia for some time as well. So just like in many other countries, COVID-19 led to, oh, sorry, Meryl, if we could go back. Oh, sorry, led to higher unemployment for women and inspired, you know, additional political attention to the importance of gender responsive procurement. This was already a policy of the government, but COVID-19 actually prompted them to put higher attention on it. And I think one of the reasons they were able to work on this throughout the crisis is because, as I mentioned, they've been working on open contracting reforms for a long time. They had, you know, great systems in place. They already had cultures of transparency, cultures of being, let's say, performance oriented in public procurement. Not to say everything's perfect, and there's definitely still many challenges, but they'd already achieved multiple success stories in terms of improving competition overall, improving value for money in certain sectors. So it made sense that this was something that inclusion was a topic that they wanted to work on, and the COVID-19 crisis made it even more important. And they recently began publishing the gender disaggregate data about their public procurement using the open contracting data standard. So I didn't mention this, but my organization stewards a free open source data standard for the publication of procurement information from planning all the way through to implementation. Colombia is one of the governments around the world that implements it. And they started to publish the gender disaggregated data. And now they're using the data to analyze the differences in women's participation by sector, by region, and by value of the contracts to look for those bright spots. You know, where are things working? Where can things be tweaked and triggered? And also consulting with stakeholders around the world. So I'll stop there, but I'm going to include in the chat some additional resources when it comes to ICT contracting and other other topics that might be interesting for the folks on the call.
That would be great. Thank you, Lindsay. So before we go to our closing remarks, my colleague Osa, she will launch at the same time the poll. It's very important for us to hear your view, how we can improve ourselves. And so thank you very much. And for all our 3 speakers, they really came with different backgrounds and, you know, and specific, and with their specific perspectives. And we talk about how we can support women-owned businesses. We talk about you know, the different platforms, and of course we discuss a lot on how we can support SDG 5. But I think, as Elizabeth said, maybe even more important than SDG 5 is how we can do this. SDG 17 is on partnership, and I love hearing about the PPP, about public-private partnerships. So maybe this is something that not only we have to join our forces between ourselves, but maybe we have to help the public sector to work together with the private sector and with us all together, and that will be the way to go. So I'm inviting Agnes Piri, and she's for the closing remarks. It will be closing remarks plus some of her experience in South Africa. And she's joining us from South Africa Multi-Country Office, and she will talk about some practical steps she's taking on the ground to support the procurement. I do work very actively with her on her work with the WEPs, but she will talk about some country level examples. And over to you, Agnes.
Thank you so much, Mara. Thank you so much, colleagues. And I won't take so much of your time. I just want to share experiences with what we've done for South Africa. Our strategy has been to do gender responsive procurement through government itself because of the huge public spend there, and of course with the private sector as well through WEPs. And some of the lessons that we've learned working with government, of course, is the issue of high advocacy that we've engaged with the president's team to just ensure that the pronouncement made by the president on the 40% gender responsive procurement is implemented by all government supply chain departments. And we're also supporting the presidency, who's now the Africa Union chairman, and provide advocacy also on GRP so that the whole region on the continent can also start promoting gender responsive procurement. And this has been funded by the Belinda Gates Foundation through the Generation Equality Forum. We're also providing a lot of training and mentorship to women entrepreneurs. And as we all know, COVID has had a real impact on women businesses. So we've taken the strategy of, just making sure that the women really are compliant in how to tender for public procurement and how to take up all these opportunities that have been pronounced by the president. And of course, with the new COVID, we're trying now to also support the School of Government to make an online, e-learning platform on GRP for supply chain officials. Next slide, please, Meryl. And some of the lessons for women empowerment principles, we had a target for 100 companies this year. We've reached 83 private sector companies sign up as web signatories. And for us, the focus is on principle 5, because we think this is actually a strategy on how women entrepreneurs will build better after COVID-19. So we try to zero in on the principle 5 component, just to help also private sector use the enterprise supplier development program, which are funds actually taken by private sector to support enterprise development. But our discussion is for them to see how more women entrepreneurs can actually benefit from this. And of course, we've launched a community of practice for web signatories to share lessons learned in implementing web and just address challenges that are being encountered during COVID on the economic situation that they're facing. We've actually, back, Mara, sorry. We've developed a database of women-owned entrepreneurs. And I think from what my other colleagues were sharing, it's always good to have this database, especially for where the big, huge spend is, such as energy, oil, transport, agriculture, construction. And since we launched this in October, we've actually received 200 profiles of women-owned entrepreneurs in this space only. So I think having that also, and then when public sector or private sector say we cannot find the women, we're able to provide them with this database. And of course, we're supporting the government through the strategic plan, which has some funds for us who want to focus on the economic power, which benefits women. And we're also trying to support municipalities, which are at the ground, at the district level. I don't know what you call them in other countries, but these are actually the ones that really reach communities in terms of how they also do tenders that are gender responsive for the women across municipalities, and to replicate these models across the country. Next slide, please. And continue these lessons, we've supported women entrepreneurs to input into the public procurement bill through webinars, and we've leveraged the Women's Month in August just to amplify the issue of gender responsive procurement through women-owned associations, dialogues, and through generating action plans going forward. And of course, we continue to just produce knowledge products for sharing on GRP. And of course, we've expanded the Buy From Women platform with an e-learning management system to train and equip women entrepreneurs on these modules, again, to really just make them ready for opportunities in the public procurement and the private sector procurement. Those are the few lessons I wanted to share with you as we definitely go on promoting issues of web and promoting GRP globally. Thank you so much, Meryl, for the opportunity to share.
Thank you very much to all of you, all the speakers, for your very valuable experiences and your perspective. And thank you very much for our participants, and apologies for a few minutes that we are delayed in the program. And stay well and healthy. So that is the end of this webinar today. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Meryl. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much for joining us.